And to everybody who's taken the time out of their really busy day to call in and listen to our first trust dialogue of the year of 2026. So welcome everyone. Ashley, I'm going to go ahead and just start since we're late. I think we've got just about everybody in. Um, so thank you for joining us. Um, for those of you who are not familiar with the Trust and Media Cooperative, we're working on a really simple, it seems simple, but it's certainly very urgent problem in our information environment. And it's that we're no longer able to gain reliable information to help make good decisions. Whether you're in business, you're in government, you're in society, you're a stay-at-home mom. And that's not really a content problem, it's an infrastructure problem. And so what Tim is we're a cooperative that's rebuilding trust and information. We're not about telling people what to think. We're not the truth police. We work on the systems, the incentives, and the standards that help people decide what information they need to trust at machine speed. So the trust dialogues are meant to be a candid, practical conversation with people who've lived through trust breakdowns or into trust rebuilding. We're not a theoretical This is not a theoretical panel session. It's about real world lessons. And I'll tell you, with AI accelerating the scale and speed and reach of information, we're seeing trust failures compound faster over institutions that were just never built to handle this sort of level of data. So the question isn't whether this matters, which it really does. It's whether we're building the right response fast enough. And so with that, I'm so happy to have Tiffany Saade here with us today. Tiffany is currently a product manager and a threat intelligence lead for AI defense at Cisco, where she focuses on how adversaries use and misuse AI models, how to secure these models, and how to enable AI into cyber defenses. She's also really engaged in the policy and research world. Tiffany, I believe you're at Oxford. You're on their cyber and tech program. I know you're very active at Stanford, their Institute for Security and Technology. And I have to say, I'm very proud that Tiffany was one of our very early research supporters to Tim 2 years ago, where she really oversaw the effort we ran up at Harvard in terms of identifying what standards for information quality are. And that was really, Tiffany played a lead role in that while she was getting her undergraduate and graduate degree at the same time. She's really a unicorn. She's got technical depth, policy policy fluency, and real world operational experience at a very early start to her career. So Tiffany, I'm so glad that you're here with us today. And just to give you an sort of what the run of show will be, Tiffany's going to talk for about 15 minutes um, uh, about just sort of the state of the world today. I'm going to come in. It's the moderator's prerogative to ask a few questions about what should the U.S. be learning from the lessons that Tiffany is seeing, and then we're going to open up for about 15 minutes for some questions. And so, Tiffany, if this works for you, I'm going to go ahead and let you take over.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm Tiffany. As Ellen mentioned, I was born and raised in Beirut. For those of you who might not be familiar with Lebanon, it's a country that has suffered for a long time with governance issues, with political instability, also with wide-scale disinformation that is really fueled by social media, but also by fragmentation and sectarianism on a socio-economic level, but also on a religious level. So obviously, this fragmentation and the rise of AI and the rise of emerging technologies has amplified and is becoming a multiplier effect for all things misleading information, fact-checking, mis and disinformation. And in a country where we don't have the right infrastructure or the right systems or government's policies to kind of govern that space and make sure that people are on the receiver's end of right, accurate, non-biased information, right? Whether that is, disseminated by technology, by newspapers, etc. it's very difficult for us to work. And we always say our hands are tied. Well, for the first time a year ago, we had our Minister of AI, who is the first ever Minister of Technology in Lebanon. And one of his core missions is one and one only thing is we are a startup ministry and we build for the people, by the people, with the people. And what does that mean? It's more than just human centricity. It's more than just looking at the citizens' pain points, but it's also about serving the right information, the right tools, the right services for the citizens. And big part of this mandate is about how do we make sure that quality information is being shared with everyone? How do we make sure that we are leveling the playing field, especially in the age of AI, in the age of emerging technology? It's exponential growth. How do we make sure that even people in rural areas, elderly, children, all have access to these platforms and to the information that they deserve to ingest? So that's a bit of a very high level introduction. Ellen, I'm gonna take it back to you, but I'm happy to delve into how we're looking at this. At the ministry, I lead the policy and the policies platform. So basically, everything that has to do with AI policy, trust and safety, cybersecurity policy for Lebanon at a national scale. And the fact that, we have that blank page, it's a country that has not been part of the AI wave or that digital transformation yet. We usually say, oh, we're on the sidelines. I like to say we're strategically late. And I use the word strategically on purpose because I think that this gives us actually an opportunity to leapfrog forward and learn from different countries and use cases around the world that have piloted AI solutions or have tried digital transformation and have failed or have made mistakes or stumbled at some points in the road. And it actually helps us reflect on how we want to deal with the information issue because it's not a technology issue only, it is exacerbated by technology.
That's a great segue to my first question, because I really agree with you. This is not a technology issue. And I mean, I feel like up until sort of this point, we've always looked at sort of information quality as a technology issue. We've expected the platforms to do things that they were never built nor intended to do in terms of being the truth police. And now you've got sort of governments, especially in the United States, that really are no longer in the business of sort of overseeing or providing guardrails in the information environment. And so, now it's a bigger than technology problem, and they're not going to be the single fix. So my first question is, what does it mean to build trust in an AI saturated information environment?
Ellen, the key word for me here, the buzzword is AI saturated, but the key word is about trust. And I think we've struggled with the concept and the foundations and the building blocks of trust way before AI has made its boom with ChatGPT. I think we've struggled with that since the beginning of time. And it's really about trust between the citizens, trust between the user and the platform, and then trust between the user and the government itself. And I think, I mean, in Lebanon, we have an issue with these three elements, primarily because for a long time, we've had an institutional vacuum, right? In the sense that we didn't have a right governance structure in order to trust it. We had to build our own. And building your own government structures means that trust is not something that is uniform for everyone. It's based on who you know, who you want to serve, who gives you money, who gives you favors, etc. So it becomes very selective and it becomes very transactional. So what we're trying to do today is say, well, trust has to be the foundation, basically the flour that you put in your cake, and the icing has to be the technology. Why is that? We cannot have a dissemination and the deployment at scale of technology or digital transformation if we don't pin down the issue of trust, and it goes down to identity in a lot of the cases. It's about how do I build systems and governments, institutions that warrant the trust of the citizen, that make the citizen feel like they're seen. I was talking about citizen-centric work, which is the bread and butter of what we do at the ministry. But it's also about, well, how do I make the citizen a part of the decision-making process, of the laws, the services, the policies that are going to affect their lives at scale? And how do I make it seen for everyone? So you have people, in remote areas of Lebanon that don't have internet connection or are not uh, AI literate, or they need upskilling. So how do we actually work on the education front to uplift these people so that they're all on the same level? And then we serve from there. Now, obviously, institutional trust and bilateral trust, it takes a lot of time to build. Everyone knows that we struggle with that in a lot of countries around the world. So that doesn't mean that we halt digital transformation until trust is established. That means we find a way for them to walk in hand. And I think that means, you gain the trust of the citizen when you start championing clear ethics and values and policies as baked into the technology and baked into AI. And this is why at the ministry, we talk a lot about secure by design and ethical by design. What do we mean? We mean that from the get-go, we aim to align systems based on security best practices, based on an ethical framework that is inspired from the values of the Lebanese people, from what we cared about. So not about just copy and pasting frameworks from around the world, but really building a technology and its backbone that works for us and for the citizens. So ultimately, I think this is how we can start by taking the first few steps forward to build trust and technology together. But the problem is if we have the technology, but we don't have the trust, you might as well want to put your technology on a shelf, or your technology is going to get misused. So this is why we also wear a bit of an adversarial security hat. Part of my work is to put myself in the shoes of a bad actor and understand how these tools can be misused, how can they be hacked, what security breaches can occur, and how can we protect our citizens and our users on these platforms. So that implicitly is also a very big component of trust, it being security aware.
So, I'm just sitting here thinking, so in some ways, you're totally building, and when we talk to Tim about the need to build an infrastructure for quality information, that's what Lebanon is doing right now. And in some ways, it's
Yes.
like you're doing it from scratch, which maybe makes it a little easier. So if you already have a system in place, it's hard to change habits, it's hard to change things. But it sounds to me in Lebanon like you are kind of starting from scratch, which maybe, I mean, how is it going? Is it I mean, it seems to me like that is not a bad way to have to start.
It's not a bad way to have to start because it's as if you tell an author who has, dedicated his life to write, here is a blank booklet, here is a pen, you can write about whatever you want, and you have no guardrails, no limits, like, the world is your oyster. This is how we feel. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that we operate on zero funding. That means we are a volunteer team who's being scrappy. We're trying, right? Taking bits and pieces of people who want to help, people who are aligned with the mission. I work pro bono, all of us do. It's about the mission, but it's also about trying to build two types of infrastructure. Like you said, there's the trust infrastructure and there's the actual hardware, like software infrastructure, which is your electricity, your data centers, your cloud, which is a long-term multi-year plan. But what we want is to ignite it and to start it, to set the right foot forward in order to start it. And obviously, the trust infrastructure is one that we deeply care about. And for me, like I said, it's about the education piece, the upskilling. Because as you always say with the team work, it's not about building the right tools only, but it's about really educating citizens and users about, detection, what's right, what's wrong, what's AI generated, what's not, which is becoming very difficult to discern, obviously. but really trying to build that nationwide global awareness of how these tools can be misused, what information is considered accurate, how do I fact check information, especially with the rise of deep fakes and AI generated content, which, as we also say with Tim, it's not always misleading or a bad thing,
Right.
right? Um, and the other layer, of course, is policy and framework. So I'll give you an example. Lebanon doesn't have an AI regulation or an AI framework or anything yet. But my team at the ministry and I, we wrote our first national AI framework, which is now out for public consultation, where we're trying to kind of set the pillars of what does ethical AI mean for the Lebanese people? What is acceptable risk? What is not? It's obviously not a regulation. It's a precursor to a policy, an AI policy, which then can become an AI regulation. But it starts from there as well, because you do want to show the citizens that we're not building left and right and center and building and breaking, which is great for startups, but not for governments, because we have the lives of citizens at stake. But we're actually building towards a North Star. And that North Star is clear and is transparent to them. So it's also about transparency.
So this requires, building an infrastructure requires the combined effort of government, business, people. Like it's a public-private challenge. How is that going? So you say there's no funding for this. Is the government driving this, or is the private sector driving this? How is it working?
Good question. I think the government is definitely not driving it. The government is at the receiver's end for one specific reason, because the government doesn't have the capacity to drive it. Because it's sad, but when we meet with different ministries, different institutions in the government, some of them are still on pen and paper. Some of them, don't have basic cybersecurity hygiene. Some of them don't have also the expertise, and I don't blame them. We've gone through massive economic crises. There's no opportunities for them to upskill. So obviously they are on the receiver's end, and what the role that they play is they come to us saying, we need help. We want to use AI. We want to digitize. We just don't know where to start. Like, we are enablers. We help them with the technology. We help them, equip them with the tools, with everything they need. And ultimately, of course, we help them with the implementation, but they come to us for that. I want to say the private sector and the academia space, both of them, have been of tremendous help and tremendous generosity, like in terms of their willingness to share expertise, to share information, to take a chance on a country that has failed them many times, a country that has driven them outside of Lebanon for many years. We're seeing them for the first time in a long time, willing and wanting to come back and help for free and pro bono and provide the service, because they do believe in one mission, that Lebanon deserves to be online, and that citizens in Lebanon deserve to be agents of technology, agents of change and of their own lives, not controlled by, other outstanding and exogenous factors. So the academia sector as well has been super helpful, because this is where the talent resides. Lebanon is known for its education system, for, students are very hardworking and passionate. So it's about the empowerment that these institutions have given and the encouragement on AI courses, but also on helping us build capacity and national AI programs, which this is obviously invaluable, because you're literally leveling the playing field between, people who are in dire socioeconomic situations, people who live in remote areas, etc. So it is about, leveling that playing field.
So, Tiffany, at Tim, we look at AI as both a tool and, a potential weapon for, how people are able to discern information that helps them make decisions. Um, and I think, of course, now the world is going gaga on AI at Davos. You had a lot of discussion about we're entering this period. I think it was the CEO of Microsoft who said we're entering this period where AI is no longer just this thing that we're studying and thinking about. Like, we're now implementing. This is the year
Yeah.
where AI is firmly being implemented in, almost every institution across any society right now. Is is Lebanon looking at AI as an interesting, fun gadget that can help them, if you're an analyst, pull together data? Like, is it just sort of one-offs, little tactical um, um, uses of AI, or are they looking at it much more strategically in terms of how it impacts decision making sort of at every level, not just in content, but also in operation?
Great question. I always like to say we have two types of microscopes. We have a macroscope and a microscope at the ministry. On the one hand, yes, we're very tactical about our work. We want to deliver. We want tangible KPIs. We want use cases. We want to see the impact. And that primarily also goes with helping, I don't know, the Ministry of Social Affairs deploy an AI agent chatbot that interacts with NGOs. It's as simple as that, helping with digitization. So, really thinking about, we don't want to go all out and fancy. It's about doing the simple things and simple steps that's going to help enable a transformation because this is where the country's at, right? I mean, I'm based in the Silicon Valley. I see the contrast between the booming AI startup ecosystem around the very sophisticated and fancy solutions that they're deploying versus, where we're still at in this terms of timeline in Lebanon. And there is a gap, right? And one of the biggest lessons I personally learned when I was trying to bridge between both worlds is they each move at their own pace, and we got to start somewhere in Lebanon. So that's where the microscope comes in. The macroscope, which is very much on the strategic level, I take the 30,000 feet view as a ministry, as a government, as a country. What does responsible AI, what does AI innovation mean for Lebanon? What does it mean for private sector? What does it mean for academia, for the startup ecosystem, but even for national security as well? So what does it mean on a technical level? What does it mean on a legal and policy level? How do we define these streams? And how do we make sure that we're building lasting bridges between all of these different stakeholders and the citizens as well, to really benefit from that transformation? So to answer your question, it's very demand signal driven from citizens and from ministries at the microscopic level. This is use cases. And then it's very much on a strategy and a higher level as well.
Okay. All right, so at this point, I'm going to shift my questions from what's going on in Lebanon to what are the lessons that we can learn in the US. And so, for those of you who are listening in on this incredible conversation, we're gonna do this for about the next 10 minutes or so, and then I'm going to open up for questions. And so, for questions, please feel free to type them in to the chat box. I think that's probably easier. We've got about 25 people online, so I think that'll be easier to do it that way. So while we're having this discussion, if you have questions, please type them in, and I'll call you out in about 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, so moving to the US now, Tiffany, because you spent a significant amount of time here working information quality, and so you've got this incredible perspective based on what you're trying to do at Lebanon. So based on some of the parallels. Between Lebanon's experience, I mean, what are some of the parallels between what you're seeing in Lebanon and early warning signs in the United States?
Mm, it's definitely not the blank page. That's definitely not a point in common. If I were to pick one, there are several. If I were to pick one, it's probably the trust layer. And I think in Lebanon, trust was non-existent. In the US, it was existent and it's eroding. So it's a bit of like, how do we put trust on like like a life machine, basically, right? And as we were saying at the beginning of the conversation, and that's just not applicable to Lebanon only, it's, how do we actually make sure that citizens are at the center of the technology and not the technology being at the center of the citizen's life? And how do we make sure that we're building AI agents? Great, but that citizens still have agency over tools. We love productivity. In the Silicon Valley, it's all about agentic AI and MCP right now, right? We're fans about a model doing everything for us. It's great. I'm not gonna argue with that. I'm not gonna pretend that we don't like it. We do. But we also want people to be able to still have control over the choices they make, the decisions they make, the places they want to go to, where they want to go for vacation, all of that stuff, right? Even the future of their kids. And that starts with trust. Another element is an element of over reliance. So there's trust and then there's over reliance. And we're seeing this both in the US and in Lebanon. When you become the consumer of AI and of technology, which I think most of us are, you tend to over rely on the tool. And that means you tend to forego your cognitive autonomy. You tend to, want to defer to the machine for the creative process. And I think, as Descartes always said, I think, therefore I am. It's the creativity and the cognition that really makes us who we are, right? If we're foregoing this to a machine, then what does that make of us? And then there's a lot of security issues when it comes to that. I know a lot of people who, vibe code, right? Who do coding completely AI generated in Lebanon and in the US. But some of the main issues we're learning today is that some of that code has massive security flaws. And so we don't realize it because we don't know how the code is built. We don't even check it. We're like, yeah, it was done in like 2 minutes. It used to take me
Right.
2 days. That's great, right? So that's another element. The third one is about really leveling the playing field. I think, obviously the US is far ahead with AI innovation. Not really with the regulatory part, but I'm not going to talk about that one. But I don't feel like everyone has equal access to the technology, not because the technology is not available. It's one thing for AI to be available widely, but it's another for, your typical citizen to know how to use it well for their own purposes. So this is something, of course, we're also seeing in Lebanon at a different scale and level. But yeah.
I know that we've seen polling data that shows that citizens in the United States, their trust of AI is actually diminishing at a time when we are, the genie is out of the bottle. You're not going to put it back in. Are citizens in Lebanon more trusting of AI?
Yes and no. I think yes, because it's like when a kid wakes up on the 25th morning and opens a Christmas present. That's the excitement we're seeing in Lebanon. It's like oh my God, this is so cool. Like, I want to use this. Like, AI this, AI that. Like, the hype is there. But I think there are two groups of people. The groups of people who are still bought into the hype and who think this is revolutionary, which it is. And they tend to kind of say, this is my source of truth. This is my bona fides. Like, I'm gonna just rely on this religiously. And then you have the new generation that's trying to wake up from this hype and be like, well, how can I trust this? Like, where does my critical thinking fit into all of this? So there's questioning that's going on as well, but most of it, I would say, because we're at the beginning of the AI wave in Lebanon, there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of excitement around adoption. Companies want to be AI ready. They want to be AI enhanced and they want to show it and they want to brand it, right? Without actually knowing the effects or the redundancies that it can cause within their organizations.
So on that front, I love the AI trust discussion. So how does AI change the speed, scale, and stakes of trust failures?
It's exactly the way it changes the speed scale of security, of cyber, of all of it. It's always, for me, it's a similar thread. There's an amplification of something that already exists. Just like, for instance, if you're repurposing AI to build something at scale, you already know how to write an email, right? It's just going to do it for you 10 times faster and at the 100x scale. With trust, if trust is already broken and trust is not established at the beginning, at the onset, this tool is a multiplier effect. So it's the exact same effect, and we're seeing it very tangibly in Lebanon. And I think a lot of people think that to solve the trust within technology issue, we have to solve it on the technology side, partially. But this is it's a soil that has not been fertile. No matter what you plant in it, it's just not going to grow. So either you solve the soil fertility problem, which is basically the trust, which is really broken, and which is going to take years. And obviously, like I said, you cannot just silo things and build technology and then build trust. Or you acknowledge that, we have to go hand in hand with both, but that trust is not only a technology problem, it's a foundational problem from the get-go.
So we've said, you've been a part of Tim for a long time, and we say that trust is not a communications problem, it's an infrastructure problem. I mean,
Yeah.
how would you describe it? Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That gave me a flashback of the time Ellen and I were in DC, and Ellen said that in front. It resonated with the audience. I just got the flashback. I would say it's not a communication problem. It's an infrastructure problem, but it's also a governance problem. Because at the end of the day, it's I trust something or I trust someone, or there's a mechanism that allows me to trust over time. So it's about a party, like a person or institution, and it's also about ways of trusting and the tools that enable me to take the steps to trust. And these for me are tools, infrastructure, but they're also about governance. If I don't have an entity that's there, that understands my pain points, that wants to serve me, that is able to, build a bridge between their power and what I need, then, that trust doesn't exist. For me, trust is about governance as well. It's about good governance. And
I
then good governance spills
agree.
over trust, and then it spills over technology, it spills over citizen participation, and it's a domino effect.
Yep, I agree. So I'm going to ask one more question and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. I know that Colin, you've thrown a couple questions in there. Thank you. So I'd encourage others who are on to type in their questions. But could you, I sort of insinuated this when we were talking a little bit more about Lebanon, but what is the
Yeah.
role of government and technology and media and academia and civil society? Like what roles do they play in this building this infrastructure?
Awareness. That's the first thing. It's about making news accessible to everyone, helping everyone be a part of the story. And this is a very big issue in Lebanon, especially with, some of the internet blackouts, some of the information that's released in different ways depending on the perspectives and the political parties, etc. Having one source of truth and having a unified collaborative media landscape is really important. This is something we totally lack, right? But it's about trying to redefine what it means to be a citizen in a country where identity is not clear. It's very fluid. There's no one definition for it. Where is my place in society? How do I want to perceive my country? How do I want to perceive the world? It's at the end of the day, it's tools in order to help you do that, right? Help you guide that. And it's been that way for the Generation Z, like myself, where we like to contribute to media and say what we think. And we also like to see it as a guiding kind of maybe a compass sometimes where we try to discover who we want to be within this country. It's very difficult because the media is very polarized already. So the polarization issue is not an issue that's going to be solved by technology. It's something that's going to be exacerbated by technology, but good to acknowledge it and know that it's there.
I love that. I characterize it that for the longest time there were other institutions that sort of played referee in the information ecosystem. The platforms did, traditional media did, and they maybe didn't do the best job, but at least there was some understanding that someone was there. But now those guardrails are all gone. Even technology is playing a very different role now. It's now looked at
Yeah.
as a business, and you talk about governance that is now a very critical partner in economic governance and political governance. Like it's even technology has changed. And so now that burden of, figuring out how to get to information that helps you make decisions is all on us. It's all on citizens and private sector institutions. It's all on us. And so I'm like, why aren't we ticked off about the fact that it's now on us, but we're just not resourced to be able to do it effectively. And it's getting harder with AI and agentic AI. You'd think the tools would help, but it's also making it harder because there's so much more data to wade through to do this. I'll answer my own question, which I think really we play the most important role now in terms of, establishing this infrastructure for quality information. Okay, this is where I'm going to stop
Yeah.
my preaching, and I'm going to first turn it. I'm going to turn it over to the audience, and I've got Colin Agee has been particularly vocal. I don't know if you can see the. I'm gonna tell his joke because if you know Colin, Colin tells jokes. And he says a horse walks into a bar. The bartender asks, "Hello, do you want a beer?" And the horse responds, "I think not," and promptly disappears, putting to carts before the horse. So
Ah,
thank you, Colin. So,
that
but
was funny.
I'm gonna go to your first question. And clearly Colin's been following you because he said in May you wrote about the role of CISA, the role CISA should play in agentic AI. How is that going and what has happened with CISA this year at the Department of Homeland Security?
Very good question. How is it going? I don't know, and they don't want to tell us, but I do know that NIST is working on quite a few standards and frameworks around AI agent security, around, model safety, redefining what does cybersecurity controls for AI agents. So this is very much in the ballpark of NIST. CISA is obviously very concerned with AI and critical infrastructure issues. So more of the role of agents and AI capabilities in, cyber attacks, in targeting sensitive platforms, water grids, electricity grids, etc. So it's more on that application front, but yeah, it's NIST that's really developing the crux of the governance frameworks for agents.
Okay. Thank you. Now, Sally Lehrman, who is a very close partner, is the founder of Trust Indicators, a new good friend. She asked the question about in Lebanon, how is Gen AI influencing people's perceptions of the value of news produced by the journalistic process within the practical and political constraints there, and also their access to original independent news? How do you see this affecting social and government trust?
Very good question. So the first part of the question, I think people people expect a content to be AI generated, even if it wasn't, and that's the bias that people go with. If it's a piece of news that they dislike or a perspective that they don't agree with, they directly assume that this has been written by a chatbot or this is not a human generated. What does that mean? I don't know, but there's this bias of if this content or this piece of news is not to my likings or doesn't align with my perspective, and this is AI generated, and then we basically talk crap about it, right? It's always about they don't give value to the journalistic process anymore. A lot of the users are consumers at the end of the day. They don't really care if it's a me or it's a model that wrote it, most of them. But I can tell you that there's a good chunk of society that still is really trying to save and hold on to the traditional journalistic process of doing investigative research and writing and doing all of that work, which I think is crucial and cannot really be replaced by a tool. And there are a lot of organizations in Lebanon. They're actually like their whole mission is to support these journalists and these people to harness their talent and upskill with AI as well. So trying to kind of combine the two together. How does it affect social and government trust? Well, the problem is there's a lot of deepfake generation in Lebanon with AI models that obviously is very, very misleading and it goes viral on social media and sometimes TV stations and media like platforms, they're not aware that it's AI generated and they amplify it. So this is a very, very big problem. And part of the reasons why they're not aware is, like Ellen said, it's becoming so difficult to discern what is AI generated, what is not, what's the source of truth and what is not, et cetera, et cetera. So unfortunately, yes. And it goes back to also like, why are we creating deepfakes with this technology? What's the point, right? Is it impersonation? Is it poisoning the information space? And how do we put guardrails around that? And this is exactly where my work comes in around the guardrails. So there's
Yeah,
no
I mean,
perfect answer, but yeah,
speed is just an incredible challenge right now because it's not just the
yeah,
speed at which corrupted information gets spread, but it's also that we now expect to be able to make decisions at machine speed. So it really is this
yeah.
interesting, and I know there's a lot more work to be done on this whole machine human teaming concept, but now decisions also can be made at speed in an infrastructure that's not built for that. So, and this really gets to Sally's question about sort of the journalistic process, very much like the
Yeah.
intelligence process for those of us who've served in the
Hmm.
intelligence community. It's very human centric. It's verification of sources. It takes time. It's the speed of,
Yeah,
how do you keep up with the speed of decisions that are now being pushed by machines? And and
exactly.
and so that's a challenge that we're certainly facing in the intelligence community, but I think we're also facing it in the journalism world. And I agree with you. I think we do need trained trained moderators of the information ecosystem to help us, but that's not where we live today. So nobody is trusted. Um, so let's see. Oh, Colin, you have another question. Are you a member of the um, okay, so I'm going to pronounce Samir Kassir Foundation. I'm not familiar with them, or the National Democratic Institute. Do you think they're having an impact?
Yeah, I'm not a member of them, but I'm very familiar with their work. Yes, they've been doing a lot of impactful work, especially the Samir Kassir Foundation for journalists and protecting journalists, supporting them, supporting their work. But also, the NDI, I know in Lebanon and globally, is also helping democratize news. So, um, they're very important pillars, but obviously they're not enough standing on their own.
Okay, so that's all the questions I have in the chat. Is there anybody else who would like to speak up? Raise a
Ellen, I
hand.
will.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Matt.
So this is both a statement and also just a question out there, and that is that um, Anthropic released their updated constitution, and um, my hypothesis generally or framing is that um, the Constitution was made in a physical world for a physical age, and that has been replaced by terms of service and economic models. And so whether it's in relation to, adversaries being able to quarter themselves within our information environment, or whether it's the lack of privacy and ownership in our own personal, digital homes, so on and so forth. And and this may be a role for Tim as well, Ellen, where there is no enshrined digital constitution that companies have to, abide by, that we all put out there, that it and that is what Anthropic is trying to do for themselves in this respect, but nobody else has to. And so it goes to the lowest common incentives, structure in terms of and damned what happens to human beings or individuals, so on and so forth. And so one, it's both a statement. Two, it's a question in terms of what is both the opportunity and the role from a broader uh, industry standards perspective to say, no, we are going to enshrine this digital constitution and or digital human bill of rights, so on and so forth. But we're going to put this into digital code that relates back to the incentive structures and the objective functions that companies are optimizing for. Because right now it's optimized for shit.
Yeah, yeah, he said it. Um, I think there's a keyword here, which is incentives, incentives, incentives. As long as the frontier AI labs and companies that actually have the technology and have control over it are not aligned with the incentives of a digital shrine like you or doctrine or whatever that you were talking about, that ain't gonna happen. That's the first thing. Second thing, it's also a very fine line between that and this being perceived as like a regulation or like a way to stifle companies' work. So there's a very easy way to spin this by the private sector. I mean, that's the thing. I kind of know both perspectives because I work with both of them. At the same time, this is why we're taking the other way with the public sector and we're starting with frameworks, with guidelines, with best practices, because those are not enforceable, which is not a great thing, but at the same time, it meets the private sector where they are ish. while putting some sort of guidelines. Obviously, it's not like the EU AI Act. You're going to be fined left and right if you don't follow it. But at the same time, we're trying to build the guidelines plus the incentives for companies to come on board and, respect that, or to kind of be aligned on what these principles are. I think something that has to happen is have a common like agreement of what are the things that are unacceptable, or things, risks that we all care about as entities in the digital space that we would want to mitigate against. That way you have the incentive already there because they all agree, right? I think we're yet to find. I have a hunch on what that can be, but I think we're yet to see it.
Matt, your comment and question has me thinking three things, Ashley. One, and I really, when you were talking about what is happening in Lebanon, lessons in the U.S., the reality is that everybody is struggling sort of with their own, setting up their own framework. We're further balkanizing the information ecosystem right now. And Matt, when you talk about this sort of this digital constitution, I mean, it really strikes me as that is a thing that could certainly help make connections. But I mean, otherwise, we're just going to further balkanize the information ecosystem, and it's going to be harder and harder, not easier and easier. So that's one takeaway I'm taking from your question. And then also the incentives, which we haven't spoken a lot about, but it is really the sort of the biggest part of all of this. How do you incentivize people to demand a different way of living in this information ecosystem? How do you incentivize companies to do
Yeah.
things differently? I mean, who do you think is responsible for all of this information quality today? I mean, it's such a big issue, but where does it start?
Hmm. Where does it start? I think, I mean, I can tell you from the Lebanon context, people don't know what to ask for. That's the problem. They want the technology, they want accurate and good information. At the same time, they want AI ethics, but at the same time, they want innovation. But at the same time, they don't want the technology to take their jobs. So there's a bit of like it's like a salad of what people want. So there's the problem with the demand signal. That's in Lebanon. I think in the US we have a different problem, which to Matt's point, it's basically, every company has an agenda. Every institution has an agenda, whether it's a good or a bad agenda. That's not what we're here to discuss. It's basically they're optimizing towards a goal, towards something. And these goals are not very aligned because they're competing against each other. And at the same time, we always forget that safety, ethics, security, they're great on paper, but you want to implement these, you got to invest money in that, right? And that's just not in the incentive of companies today until they get breached, until they actually get hit and they see the impact. So it's very reactive. So unfortunately, I think where it starts is for companies to actually see the damage that it causes, and then they will react to that. Or engage in red teaming and engage in actually trying to attack your own model and ethically, and understand how the model fails, what it reacts to, and then build from there. That way you minimize the risk threshold. It doesn't completely go away, but at least we're doing something. But that's all very costly. So yeah.
Jen Fang just added, where does it start discussion? It ends with liability. I think she's right. And who has to pay for a penalty around data protection? A bit flawed, but curious what others are seeing in the US with the uptick of demand in the commercial sector.
It's a very good question. I think that's a global. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just going to say, I think the problem is that there's so much money now tied into like fines don't matter. Like, the penalties we have don't matter. It's a, they can, so whatever the EU puts in there, the fact that the 10% of Meta's revenue last year came from known fraud. Like, sorry, I'm a bit this morning, Ellen. I'm like, we're dithering around the edges, and I feel like a Boston Tea Party moment where that it is enough from the where our economic incentive structures are at, and what is our new constitution in this respect, because we don't have it.
Yeah, I think
We don't have it.
the whole regulation, EU regulation, what we're seeing right now is sort of every nation state is building their own system, and they're saying you're going to build your own system based on my values, my infrastructure, the way we operate. And so that's what I was getting to with the balkanization piece. So you're right, EU regulations don't matter because we don't, everybody has sort of a different incentive structure. So
And
um,
I put in the chat because I think it's very instructive. So this was just a Notebook LM generated piece from the English translation of China's new proposed regulations for their trust in AI and what they're demanding.
Yeah.
Now they put there front and center. It has to have the ideological values of China. All we need to do is replace their ideological values with classical, liberals and so on. But what else they put in place or call for, they recognize that the damages and dangers societally and the education aspects and so on and so forth. And so this is also the other piece. We have the argument as to, well, if we put any regulations on anything, we're going to stifle innovation, and that's BS. Anyway, sorry.
no,
Yeah,
Moderator.
I think
I will. Yeah, if I actually agree with what Matt said, and I think what I'm trying to bake from the get-go in the Lebanese context is that this narrative of, and I'm sorry for the EU counterparts in the room here, but the narrative that the regulation stifles innovation and et cetera, this is poisonous in my opinion. Why? Because then you're trying to make people like choose between I'm going to choose safety or I'm going to choose innovation. The or has to be replaced with an and. But what does that mean today? The balance is something that each country, government, company has to deal with, depending on their business use cases, depending on the risk that they can accept, and depending on the sector they operate in. But that proposition should be changed, in my opinion. It goes hand in hand. You cannot have innovation without security. That just doesn't work. You're going to have a supernova where you're going to have the innovation boost, boom, it's going to explode, and then there's going to be a big security incident, and then we're going to be back to ground zero and rebuilding the tool. So we didn't really do anything there. It's short-lived. So for this to be long-lived, you want to have security at the beginning.
With this, I'm going to say thank you, everyone, and thank you, Tiffany, for our first trust dialogue of the year. Again, I apologize for getting a late start. That was not Tiffany, that was me. But I will tell you that we packed a lot into 50 minutes, so thank you very much. And we will pull together a transcript of this discussion. We won't attribute comments. But Tiffany, thank you for kickstarting us off on what I know will be an incredible year. I like that we're planning on hosting our next one in April. More information will be coming out on that. And with that, I hope for those of you who are in the East Coast side, you stay warm and stay safe. And for everybody, I hope you stay warm and stay safe. And we'll be talking to you here very soon. Have a good day and a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.